So, I'm just going to stop it. Anyway, so the banks have to make these loans. They have to consider welfare as income. The government's giving these people the down payment. The banks have to meet a quota. Where do you think this shitload of bad loans is coming from? Now, the banks, they don't want these bad loans on their books, okay? Most people don't know this, but banks are required to set aside a certain amount of money in anticipation that some of these outstanding loans are going to fail. You got $100 billion out in loans, you need to set aside a couple of $1 billion in anticipation that some of these are going to fail. Even in a good economy, loans go bad. You're making loans to a small business, to a dance studio who wants to borrow $5,000 to do some improvements. 6 months later, it didn't help. They go bankrupt. The bank has to eat that $5,000. Even in a good economy, that kind of stuff happens. So the banks have to set aside, and it's a government law. It's a government law that the banks have to set aside a certain amount of money in anticipation that some of these loans are going to go bad. Now, two things affect how much they set aside. First of all, it's a straight percentage. You got this many loans out, you have to set aside a certain percentage. The higher risk the loan is, the more they have to set aside, because the more expectancy there is for that number of loans to go bad. You got a lot of high risk loans out there, you have to set aside a lot more than another bank that has the same dollar value in loans, but they're lower risk loans. They have to set aside a lower percentage of money. Another thing affects that is the economy. As the economy goes south, the amount of money you have to set aside goes up, because low risk loans become medium risk loans, medium risk become high risk become ultra high risk, and the ultra high risk that we're giving loans to people on welfare who've never paid for anything, whose credit score is 4, those ultra high risk loans, forget about it. You're not getting that money back. So the economy goes south, the amount they got to set aside goes up. The higher risk the loan is, the more they have to set aside. Now these banks don't want this loan on their books. If the people pay the money back, they're going to make a killing off these high interest. They're not paying the money back. These people have never paid anything in their fucking lives, okay? They're on welfare. They're called welfarians. They're not paying this shit back. So, what do? The banks don't want these loans. They're required by law to make the loans. They don't want the loans on their books. They don't want to have to set aside extra money for these loans they know are bad. They know they're not going to get paid back. They've never been paid back. There's a history there. Okay? So what do? They sell the loans. They go out and they sell the fucking loan. Now, what other banker in the world is going to be stupid enough to buy that loan? Well, apparently Freddie and Fannie are stupid enough to buy that loan under government guidance. Freddie and Fannie are overseen by the government. You know, I think when Nancy Pelosi took over as Speaker of the House in 2006, now they get to decide who gets to chair all these committees. And I think they said, who wants to oversee Freddie and Fannie? And I think Barney Frank thought she said, who wants to go over and see Freddie's Fannie? And Barney said, oh, I do. Jeez. So Barney Frank is in charge of overseeing Freddie and Fannie. They are the only fucking a lending institution in the world that bought these fucking loans. No other bank wants to touch them. Every other fucking bank wants to get them off their books as fast as they can. Freddie and Fannie's buying them up. Freddie and Fannie, just like every other lending institution in the country, has to set aside money in anticipation that some of these loans are going to go bad. They're buying these loans up like candy. They're just buying them up. They've got to set aside more and more and more money. These are high-risk loans. The interest rates are in the teens. That's how bad they are. That's how much the lenders don't anticipate getting any of that money back. If the interest rates hit 20% on these loans, that means that the bank only expects 1 in 5 to actually pay them back. If it's 15%, what is that? 1 in 7? About 1 in 7 they expect to pay them back? Really? Fuck. Who wants those goddamn loans on their books? So, they turn those loans over, or they sell the loans. Freddie and Fannie is the only fucking idiots on the planet buying them. So they're setting aside more and more and more money. Freddie and Fannie's only worth this much money, and they're setting aside more and more and more and more and more. And don't forget, the other key factor there, other than the risk of the loan, is the economy. So they're setting aside, they're only worth this much. Can you see that? Yes. They're only worth this much. They're setting aside more and more and more and more. When the economy goes south, they have to set aside more. That spikes up because the economy, if they stay the way they are, the economy stays the way they are, they're eventually going to run out of money. As soon as the economy goes bad, they got to set aside more money, and that just spikes straight up and hits the ceiling of what Freddie and Fannie is worth. They can't set aside any more money. They don't have any more money. They're not worth any more money, and no lending institution in the planet is stupid enough to loan them any money to keep buying these fucking loans. So, Freddie and Fannie keep buying these loans. Freddie and Fannie have to keep setting aside money. 2001, 2004, and 2008, George Bush, remember him, the guy with the IQ of a 5th grader? He told them Freddie and Fannie cannot keep buying these bad loans. They're not worth that much. They're going to run out of money here. And it's kind of ironic that in 2008, when Freddie and Fannie was, and why did the economy go south? They want to blame Bush. They want to blame Bush on the recession. Okay, whatever. In August 2008, every economist on the planet said Freddie and Fannie are going to run out of money any day now. Any day they're going to run out of money because they're only worth this much, and they're setting aside more and more because they keep buying these fucking loans. Because the banks have to make the loans to meet their quotas, and then they sell them, and Freddie and Fannie are buying them. But Barney Frank said, everything did fine, everything did fine. 2 months later, right before the election, Freddie and Fannie runs out of money. Barney Frank says, it's all George Bush's fault. And everything hits the fucking fan. Now, Bush told them in 2001, 2004, 2008, they can't keep buying these loans. So how does it feel, Nancy Pelosi, Barney Frank, and all the rest of you idiots? How does it feel being outsmarted by the 5th grader? Of course, why did the economy tank? What's the definition of a recession? Definition of a recession for over 100 years has been 2 or more consecutive quarters of negative growth. 2 or more consecutive quarters of negative growth. Now, the Democrats want to change that to just any 2 quarters. Oh, really? Okay. Well, Bush was president for 8 years. That's 32 consecutive quarters. For the first 30 of those quarters was positive growth. Only the last 2 were negative. Now, I made a chart that showed the economy, the stock market, first as a relation to who was president. It doesn't follow who the president was. But if you map it against who controls Congress, the ups and downs of the stock market follows exactly who controls Congress. Every time the Republicans control Congress, stock market's going up. When the Democrats took over in even during not Jimmy Carter, Clinton's term, when the Democrats took over part way, economy went down. When Republicans took back over again, went back up again. 2006, Nancy Pelosi took over, stock market plummeted. But still, they want to change it to any 2 quarters. They just don't want it. Now, they point to some quarter back at the end of 2007 because it was a low positive and say that was the start of the recession. If that was the start of the recession, the next quarter and the next quarter would have ended that recession, because these 2 quarters were as positive as any previous quarter that was a normal positive quarter growth. It was a good economy. So if that was the start of the recession, this one and this one ended it.